Our session titled Equity-Based Practices That Promote Social Justice. So before we're going to begin, we would just like to know who are in the room. So who among you are elementary teachers? Yay. Middle school? All right. High school? Yay. Instructional coaches? District level administrators, school site administrators. Did I forget something? Yes, ma'am.
Pre-K.
Pre-K, I'm so sorry.
Special ed.
Special ed.
University higher.
University, all right.
Library.
Library, awesome, thank you so much.
Preschool.
Preschool, thank you. So, and from the county. All right, so welcome. We are the Tres Amigas of the Mathematics Department of the Santa Clara County Office of Education. I'm Bernadette Salgarino.
I'm Jenny Cheng. And Kristen Sarginger.
And we are going to share with you our journey of the social justice in mathematics education, and that we actually got from a grant through the Region 5 Community of Practice. And so in today's session, okay, thank you, Kristen. So for the purpose of our work in today's session, we are going to base the term equity from the work that we have with the Region 5 Community of Practice, which is also anchored from the different resources that we're going to be using in today's session through Dr. Rochelle Gutierrez's work here, and also the Teaching Mathematics for Social Justice Conversations with Educators, and also one of the resources that we will be having through the activity that Kristen is going to be leading us, as well as Jenny. And with that, the equity-based practices that we will be working on together as we highlight that is through this rehumanizing mathematics for Black, Indigenous, and Latinx students, which is one of the huge work from the different educators all over the country, led by Dr. Gutierrez, on seeing these different dimensions that we can practice in the classroom to truly promote equity through social justice. And these eight dimensions are the participation positioning, cultures, histories, windows, mirrors, living practice creation, broadening mathematics, body emotions, and ownership. And in the session that we'll be having, we will be highlighting 3 of the 8 dimensions or practices that promote rehumanizing of mathematics or rehumanizing other content areas, such as participation, broadening mathematics, and ownership. Participation and positioning actually recognizing the fact that we have hierarchies or orders in the classrooms or in the school districts. But then we have to shift that notion of those hierarchies so that the power is onto the kids rather than the teachers, onto the students rather than the text. We also have the second dimensions as cultures and histories, because this also has to acknowledge the students' fund of knowledge, their cultures, their upbringing, their roots, their histories, and having that as a great conversation, as a great anchor of the different mathematics that they are coming in as a student in a classroom. Windows and mirrors opens the doors for the reflection as how they are viewing themselves as partners in the learning of mathematics. We as teachers, we as administrators, facilitating that ownership, giving them the opportunity to reflect and viewing where they are at in terms of settling in the different mathematical concepts that they are learning in the classroom. But also, in the work of Dr. Gutierrez, she also mentioned about the concept of in Lakesh. And I would like to read it as the way she mentioned here, you are another me, I am another you. Helps to illustrate the fact that the students are not seeking to know themselves with respect to mathematics, but they are also seeking to understand themselves in the relationships that they are going to be finding as they find enjoyment into the lessons, into the concepts that they're learning in the classroom. Living practice and creation also recognize the fact that mathematics is something in motion, and that goes along well with body emotions as well. It conjures up feelings of joy. It makes it more of a verb rather than a noun, meaning to say that those explanations, those critiquing, those justifying, those experiences are part of the learning of mathematics. And of course, broadening mathematics is about recognizing other forms of mathematics. Currently, we see that mathematics is along the progression of number sense, relationships, algebra, then calculus, and so on and so forth. We have to recognize that there are also other forms of mathematics. Ethnomathematics, we have the statistics, and making it clear that mathematics is not just those manipulations of symbolic representations, but also qualitative. So that in itself, again, pushes for the mathematics standards that we have today for the Common Core, but also finding the opportunity to be involved, mostly in the talking, in the deciding, and seeing themselves as part of the curriculum. And ownership, not just owning their own, the learning of the concept, but also finding themselves as one with math. So, in other words, the opportunity to being involved in the different aspects of the learning process is also seeing them as participative of the nature of the culture that we'll build within the classroom. And so, as we go through in the parts of this session, that parts or three, we highlight some of these, but mostly 3 of these 8 dimensions are going to be experienced by you through some tasks that we're going to be doing.
Okay, so we recognize that some of you may have not known that you were going to come and do math today. So we wanted to make sure we preface that whole thing. We wanted to contextualize it for you and give it a discipline in which we can do it. And obviously, as mathematics coordinators, it's the one that we are most familiar with. So what I'm going to ask you to do is you should have an index card at your desk or at your table. If you could all just take an index card and a writing tool. Mm-hmm. And as you're getting that out, want to kind of bring us together and talk about this term social justice. We hear that a lot lately. We hear the term social justice, we hear the term equity, we're hearing the term access quite a bit. And so what I like to do is give you about 90 seconds to just jot down an initial thought. What does it mean to you? And you're not going to share this with anybody else. So feel free to be as honest with yourself and feel free to be as honest with yourself. So take about 90 seconds and don't feel like you have to have this, extremely defined explanation. What does it mean to you? So let's take about another 30 seconds. So when you're ready, I'm actually going to go ahead and ask you to just go ahead and turn the index card over, set it aside. We're actually going to come back to it at the end. So as Bernadette started off by mentioning, when we first started this work, we were actually a committee of 13 people. And as a committee of 13 people, we all came in with a variety of experiences, a variety of personal experiences, and a lot of kind of definitions of what all this meant to us. So we went through kind of a bit of a protocol that helped us define what social justice meant to us personally, as well as what does it mean for us as a county, what does it mean for us as a committee, what does it mean for us as a region. And so for us, Region 5 comprises of Santa Clara County, San Benito County, Santa Cruz County, and Monterey County. And so what we'd like to do is actually engage you in the same protocol that our team went through. And it's a protocol called Quotes Cafe. And so the purpose of this protocol is actually to give people a very structured opportunity to kind of formalize their thoughts around a handful of selected quotes. And I'm going to go ahead and begin by explaining the process, or excuse me, explaining the protocol first, which is actually going to be done in 3 rounds. And the 3 rounds each represent a different type of engagement. So on the round 1, you'll be engaging with yourself. Round 2, you'll be engaging with small group, and hence we asked you to move forward and join a group. And then round 3, we will be engaging whole group. So that's just to give you, some people appreciate knowing kind of what the next steps are, so that will do that. Okay. So at your table, you're going to see a stack of colored paper. And what printed on each piece of paper is a different quote that was pulled from one of the books, the 2 books that Bernadette referred to. And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask one person to kind of, and you're going to have to kind of clear your desk in just a moment, and you're going to lay the posters around the table so it's viewable to everyone. Great. And if you're ready for the next step, you can turn them over, it's okay. And the next step, so in your pencil boxes, you should find a stack of sticky notes. So if you could each grab a stack of sticky notes and a writing tool. Okay, so let me go ahead and explain the process here. So for round 1, you're going to need a sticky note and writing tool. And round 1 is going to take place in complete silence. And the reason for that is because it gives us a moment to kind of take a pause on the quotes. The quotes themselves can conjure up, for some of us, some really deep-rooted traumas, so to speak. Maybe they bring up really positive experiences, and maybe for some of us it brings back not so positive experiences. So we want to kind of honor the fact that round 1 takes place in complete silence. As a matter of fact, I'd also like to invite you, if you want, you and your group, to actually stand up and move around the table to do that. You're welcome to sit as well. So those are that's the option. So when I say go, you're going to grab a sticky note, grab your writing tool, stand up if you like, safely move around the table reading the different quotes. You will select one quote or more, it's up to you, that resonates with you. It could be something that you agree with. It could be something that you're unsure of and might want to learn more about, or maybe it's something that doesn't really sit well with you at this particular time. Okay. Once you've selected a quote, on the sticky note, I'm going to invite you to share how that quote resonates with you. You can do this in writing. You can use a series of drawings. You could use whatever artistic expression. If you want to do interpretive dance, that's up to you. And then you don't need to put your name on it. All you need to do is just put your thoughts on that. Okay? Once you're done, you're going to place the sticky notes right on top of the perimeter of the quote. Okay? And then as a reminder, once again, round 1, complete silence. And then, like I said, for some of us, this may conjure up some feelings, and so we want to make sure we allow that person to kind of have that space. So we'll have 3 minutes to engage in round 1. Before I ask us to begin, are there any clarifying questions that I might be able to clear up? All right. You know what, I think, yeah, okay, so we'll do 3 minutes. Okay, go ahead. Do you have a timer? Should I do a timer?
I got it.
Okay, awesome. I think there was.
Oh, you can't.
No, it did.
Oh, is it? Oh. Let's see if it looks like. Wait, go. Oh, here. That's so weird.
Go ahead and ask you to pause on your writing. If you're not finished
Writing, it's okay. For our next round, you'll have a little bit more time as well. So let me go ahead and explain round 2. So for round 2, the purpose of this round, once again, is to encourage small group discussion around 1 or 2 of the particular quotes. As a table, you can decide to begin with one quote. Maybe you want to talk about 2 quotes together in conjunction with one another. We trust that you can figure that out as a group for yourself. And so in a moment, I'm going to go ahead and pose some questions for you to think about. Feel free to use these questions, or if your conversation takes you a different route, that's completely fine as well. I'd like to preface this by saying that we recognize that not everyone in the room works directly with students or works directly with teachers, so figure out the context for which it works for you. We also recognize that the quotes in itself speak directly around mathematics. We can feel free to lift the word mathematics out of it and replace it with a different discipline, replace it with something that works for you. Okay? Perhaps you might want to take the perspective. If you want to stay with the quotes, another way to think about it is perhaps you might want to take the perspective of a parent, or maybe you're a cool auntie like myself, and I'm thinking about it through the eyes of my niece, who is starting kindergarten this year. So here are the discussion questions, and you and your group should use as part of your conversation. So it says, engage in a conversation around the quotes by discussing one or more of the following. Where am I along this journey? In what ways am I working towards this? How does this awareness impact student success and learning? Feel free to replace I with my grade level, or my school site, or my organization, or perhaps my district. Once you and a small group are done with one quote, feel free to move on to another, and then we'll have 7 minutes for round 2. Are there any clarifying questions that I might be able to address at this point? Okay, lovely. Introduce yourselves and get to know one another.
Oh, a couple of minutes? Yeah.
I am a manager in the safety of Highland Library. I'm working on the great implementation process. Do you work in this building?
Ever being sort of asked to reflect on my experiences, what personal life experiences maybe that's more like where I'm thinking about middle school, high school, what I thought of sort of there's nothing about it, you don't know anything about it.
When I'm going to the bathroom in the library, and then they have this and that. I don't know, Richmond, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it.
We have a very diverse population.
I was kind of thinking about it.
I don't know how many of us we have. Especially that, but that is like, maximizing education benefit and if you
But they might be out, and that's what they said, so they never moved past and aren't really thinking about in what ways is
that's it.
So we actually, our philosophy is to work together. Everybody works. So we really are. So we're pictured. And if you make an application, on the shirt.
But those same concepts are the things that I would love to see special education teachers do in very interactive way. We can do the same thing,
Or even things like, okay, well, how many things did you do? Every day we eat many cookies, that, and the baby is there 5 days a week, and then just eat. So, are you doing it? And trying to make sure that they're like interested. So again, it's much easier to do that
right, as soon as it gets past that, they're
Yeah, I wonder about why is it harder to trade, why is it harder to calculate? Because I I think, I think part of this to me is, this particular quote is obviously centered on identifying student experience and relating to math, using their experience as a resource, right, for the process of teaching. And I think if calculus or trigonometry is valuable at all, it must be happening all the time. Right? Like, if you look outside, calculus and trigonometry must be happening all the time. Otherwise, we have no purpose in teaching. So where are we making those connections? Right? Just like looking out at the world, there's calculus, there's calculus. How did they figure out how to do that? Right? And connecting it. And I think that I don't know, maybe great calculus teachers.
And that's where I think some of the breakdown are not mathematicians. I don't know how to find them. It was right here, I was thinking traditional I don't know.
There is inequity built into the system.
Why is the parabola?
Exactly. There's some equation.
Classic example, right? I shoot a free throw with calculator and you're never like, you do not know how to. You don't have to be able to calculate the parabola to shoot a free throw. And in fact, most people who shoot free throws do not know how to calculate that. Exactly. Right. It's I don't know, an opener. It's your cold open to calculate.
They come in not knowing.
But at least I guess we can just
It's kind of like they've been hidden in the past.
super interested, racing cars or whatever. And what I think it's so my
So he can hear me in the back. Okay, so now I'd really like to hear from you. What are some common themes or discussions you had in your group around these quotes that you like to share?
I was really impacted by, should I read the quote?
I think, are they all the same color, Jenny? So the gray?
The gray one. And my response to it was, to me, education is in the mathematical sense is the promotion of critical thinking rather than indoctrinized memorization, that textbook model. And everyone is unique in the processing of information.
Right, so many, I don't know about your experiences in mathematics, but for a lot of us, like this is the way you do it. So you watch the teacher do it, and then you do 20 problems exactly like that, and then you hand it in if you are really compliant and follow directions that the teacher wants, and you will get the right, and you'll get an A, right? But if I have some kind of like creativity or like divergent thinking, or I'm bringing my own kind of spin to it, then it's often sometimes can be looked down upon, right? And so trying to really open up all of our minds to there's not one way, but there's lots of different ways, and bringing students background knowledge is an asset.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you for sharing that. Did any other table group have any common themes they discussed?
I think a theme, like we as teachers were taught to bring in, background knowledge and, have all these things that we do in the classroom, but you can't expect the kids to have that experiences at home. Like their background knowledge, their community, their home life might just be awful. They don't have internet, they don't have it. So you can't just have this equitable, they're not going to have an equitable experience because some kids are doing after school programs and, parents are paying for it. They're getting all this extra help in that. Specifically at our school, we have an after school program. Well, who's in there? It's not these kids, it's these kids.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids that really need it aren't there. And the ones that are there already know a lot.
I'm seeing a lot of head nodding around like the kids that need it the most aren't getting it. The kids that may not, we all need it, but like may not need the most are the ones that are showing up, right? And so that's something for us to be really thinking about. So if that's something that resonated with a lot of us, what can we do? Like, we're talking about action in a little bit, but what are some things we can do to maybe change that? And yes, in our classroom, we're always going to have students coming into our classroom that have different background knowledge, which was culture, whether it's a culture or the language they speak, or socioeconomic, like the certain opportunities that some have that others don't have. It's so important to know who our kids are, kind of what they're bringing in, and again, looking at them more as an asset. And so how can we take where they are and to move them forward with that? So thank you for sharing. One other table would like to share? Thank you.
We were discussing the quote on the purple paper about bringing a child's knowledge and experience from their homes into the math, and we were discussing how it's so much easier to do when the math is at an easier level. Mm-hmm. And then as it gets more complicated and more intense, it's harder to bridge that connection with what the student is going to be interested in, even though that's going to help them be more engaged in it.
Right, it's much easier. Well, I would think, as an elementary teacher, for me it would be easier to make the connection about like adding, subtracting, or multiplying than looking at quadratics. I know I can do that, and there's a lot out there. I know Bernadette would help me with that. But like off the top, like I can be thinking a lot of what, so it's super important that we make those connections to our kids. And we're making connections with our kids that they relate to in their world. If I'm going to be making talking about something like around going to Yosemite, or the plane trip that I took, or the mountain adventure I went on skiing, slope and skiing, and my kids have never even seen snow, that's probably not the best analogy for me, or the best kind of problem solving I need to bring in. So who are my kids? What's their background? What are they interested in? And how can I make the mathematics relevant to them? So super important conversation.
Yeah, and we were also just talking about how, because many of us were educated in a very traditional format, we didn't learn to make those connections ourselves, and so it's hard to conceptualize those connections sometimes as you get into the higher level concept.
It's, teaching is an interesting profession because we started it when we were in kindergarten. Because if you think about what kindergarten is for you, if you can kind of think back that far, that's what kindergarten is for you, right? If I'm a lawyer, I haven't had any experiences when I was 5 years old. Well, maybe, but for the most part, I probably wasn't in a courtroom when I was 5 years old, right? But I was in a classroom at 5. I was in a classroom at middle school, right? I remember what that was. And so for me, when I think of middle school mathematics, that's what I think of, rows, right? Teacher up front. And so if I want to shift that, it's harder. Because I have to take what I experience, and for me, I might have been really good in that environment, but it's not what's best for everyone. So we're talking about self-reflection in a little bit, how important that is. So great conversations. Okay, one more, and then we're gonna move on because I want to make sure we can do other activities today.
I was going to piggyback on that.
Sure.
It should be parents,
Yeah.
The experience at 5, that was what kindergarten looks like. So helping parents to make that shift as well, not just the teacher, but parents sometimes have an expectation that this is what school is supposed to look like. Is also a shift that needs to happen.
And what's the function of school, and why do we have school, right? And the parent piece, we do a lot of work with parents and trying to help them with that shifting piece. Also, I mean, Inclusion Collaborative, like, what's the best for special education students? Jenny.
I just want to share just more of a personal thought. So my husband works in finance, so he works in spreadsheets all the time. And so we'll do some math. Like sometimes I'll have him do some of the work that I do. And it's really interesting because he gets the numbers real quick, right? So if I ask him what's like 38% of like 12,500, he'll go, right? Whereas I'm over there and I'm drawing, like I have like my 13 different ways of thinking about it. And I'll actually share with him, I'm like, look, babe, look. And he's like, I don't get it. Why don't you just do it this way? It's so much faster. And in his mind, and we're like planning for a family and things like that, I'm like, you really need to shift the way that you're thinking about mathematics or how we even approach things, because here I am a kid and I'm coming to you and I'm like, look, Dad, 13 different ways. And you're like, no, dude, just figure out just this one. This is the right one. This is the fastest one. So what are we essentially telling that child to say all the 12 other ways that you did was not as important or not as valuable. Yeah. So on top of like shifting our students' mindsets, shifting parent mindsets, it's also shifting our own mindsets.
So much work. I'm going to hold that just for a second, and then we'll come back, I promise. All right, so when you walked in today, can you put the quotes, kind of put them in a pile on your table.
Do we need to take a
You can keep the Post-its on them. That's fine. We're behind. All right. So if everyone could get out this article that I shared with you when you came in, as well, there's a note-taking guide that, see, I will be taking your papers though, Erin. Sorry, that's what happens when you sit in the front. And note-taking are front and back. So you need these two documents and probably a writing utensil for this next part. So like Bernadette and Jenny said, we received a grant from the state to focus on social justice and mathematics. And we've been working on this grant for about a year now. And as we were working together with, again, our county office and our region and the committee, we really needed to look at different folks, different research, different organizations have different definitions of what social justice is. So as a team, we decided that we needed to come together and look at something that we could ground our work in. What's something that we all believe in? And so this position paper that's in front of you comes from the National Council of Supervisors of Mathematics and a group called TODOS, which is Mathematics for All. And this is a position paper taking a particular view around what mathematics or social justice is and what are some things we can do to make a difference. And so what we wanted to engage you in is kind of going to get into this document, because this is kind of where we are kind of positioning ourselves. So you'll notice on the document where it says, what is social justice and mathematics education? Everyone see that? It's on the first page. And there's 4 different components of social justice and mathematics. The first is eliminating deficit views of mathematics learning, and that's found on page 1 and 2, and you'll see it bolded. Does everyone see that? Thumbs up? Okay. The next one is eradicating mathematics as a gatekeeper. That's found on pages 2 and 3, and you'll see that bottom left side. The third one is engaging the socio-political turn of mathematics education, which is on page 3. It's kind of the shorter one. And then fourth is elevating the professional learning of mathematics. Does everyone see those 4? Okay. So we're going to be engaging in these 4 elements in a protocol called Jigsaw. And this might be something that you've engaged in before. So in order to do this Jigsaw, we need to be in groups of 4. So I'm wondering if, I can't see your name.
Grace.
Grace, could you join this team over here so or this team, whichever one you like. They're including her. Great. Not that you weren't including her. So what I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask specific groups to read specific elements of social justice and mathematics. So could you all read the first one, which is the eliminating deficit views? Could you guys read the next one, the mathematics as a gatekeeper? Could you all read the fourth one, which is the professional learning of mathematics? And could you all read the third one, which focuses on the socio-political? I know I did this a little different, but 1, 2, 3, 4. Got it? Okay, perfect. So for this protocol, I'm going to ask us to take some time to quietly read your section. And then on this note-taking guide that I gave you, if you turn that to the part that has a check box on the top, it says check the box if you're reading. So whichever one you read, you're just going to check that one. And then we're going to do some self-reflection before we do any kind of small group or large group, because I want you to have time to really digest and process what you're reading and really think about what are the key elements or key points of this reading, what stands out to you, and how do you see this being played out in your setting, played out, like implemented. What do you see? I know at our table here we were talking about tracking and about the haves and the have-nots. Like what's happening at your site related to what you read? But mathematics isn't a big focus of yours at your site because of your role that you play. Like Jenny and Bernadette had said earlier, take like mathematics out of it, put students with disabilities, put something else in there that pertains to you, because even though the mathematics is the content, it's just kind of universal for a lot of other things. So that's kind of where I'd like for us to start, and then I'll give the rest of the directions after this part. So thumbs up if we're clear on our directions, reading individually, and then filling out that sheet. Good? What? 1, 2, 3, 4. I know. Sorry. I'm not apologizing. There's a reason for my madness. Okay. So please go ahead and get started. I'll start a timer for about 5 minutes, and I'll check in maybe 4 minutes. The which one? What's after? Oh.
just a 5 with you protocol?
Fifth means you're ready to move on. This would be like, I need 5 more minutes, 4 more minutes, 3 more minutes, 2 more minutes. Okay. I'm going to give us about 2 more minutes. If you're done, look on the back page. Again, sorry, Erin, you're in the front with me. Go to page number 4 where it talks the 3 steps of implementation. And you can start reviewing that as you're waiting for the extra 2 minutes. This is yours. Let's change this. All right. Finish that last sentence that you're writing down or sharing. All right, what I'd like for us to do now with this protocol is to share in your small group. First of all, what are the key points? And secondly, kind of how is this being played out? And I want you to be conscious as you're in your groups of equity of voice, making sure that everyone's voice is being heard and everyone is able to share. So I'll give us about 3 more minutes for that. Go ahead.
Like how do people conceptualize themselves as agency and voices violating that identity construction and sociolinguistic terms seeks out disaffected students and gain those perspectives to change academic learning. So we're not trying to change the learning, and then ultimately give us, like the values that math can use to solve real problem situations.
And I just added
How did you get the credential?
and it's not sufficient, like to realize that everything that culture that everything is still understand problem solving so that we can apply it as together, just understanding basically, and it's not just about use that one like just right now.
You know, just having our
Exactly, like that's what I wrote, just that last sentence, math proficiency that transcends tech well, education are social justice that income. That also led to less.
it's something where the whole
And then for the second question,
community got together, you know, like the teachers.
I think besides, I'm thinking about my own daughter
We all
who
got
attends
to
school.
Well, I'll tell you what I thought.
Or if I'm thinking about teaching a teacher, I can figure out where to go.
What I think about your daughter
Yes.
is that, and my daughter is that I think. But here's the thing, think about it, the worst. I don't, but what you think about the learning from a social justice support, I think you think about it like strengths and challenges as you learn. With critical thinking skills, you struggle with language, that, you know, and we struggle to make connections to real world issues. I don't think we do that very well. And so, what I think that leads to is when a learner struggles, what is the point of continued struggle? If it's math to math sake, then I just, you know, my identity as a math learner, I'm not good at math. And like, you just sort of either, you know, self-conceptualize.
Making sure every voice has been heard during those 2 minutes.
And then on the other side, when the student knows where else are they to go? Like, I know that. Like, you know, and if we don't have anything for them to apply that knowledge in a real world way, it just becomes this whole steady march toward accumulation of knowledge. You know, but like, why is it important to understand the meaning? How do we see that actually play out? You know, or when we see statistics in
Aren't you glad you came to speak to this one? I know.
If that number shocks you, why? How do you get into like, you know, polling and what's the name of it? Like those are interesting.
Okay, I'm going to ask us to come back together, kind of bookmark that conversation. One thing I didn't share, and Jenny had shared it earlier, but I just want to piggyback off of what she said, or support what she said. As I was walking around listening, a lot of the conversation came to you personally. When I was in school, or to my family member, for my son, my daughter, niece, nephew. And there were some folks who were kind of getting a little upset about some things that they were reading when they were kind of looking at personally. And so that happened. And so I just want to like validate that that's a normal for us all. There's something called math injuries, like you talked about that earlier. Something that we kind of laugh at that, but it's something that happens in our life that made us at some point feel like I can't do math. And it might have been in 3rd grade with multiplication facts. It might have been when I was in middle school and I didn't get in the higher track. It might have been when I was in high school and they're looking at AP classes and my counselor said, you really shouldn't take AP. Again, you know, or it might have been in college when, you know, I thought I was so strong in math and I started struggling a little bit. I'm like, now I can't do that. Like at some points, not all of us, but that might have happened to us. And so it just, you know, again, realizing that that's a journey that some of us took along the way. But I always kind of think about if that was part of your journey, what are we going to do so it doesn't happen to someone else? Right? What can we do? Okay, so that's a little aside. So what I'm going to ask us to do next is to, we read your assigned section, you answered the questions on the your sheet, you shared your key points with your small group, and now I'm going to ask that you create a poster around kind of the key points or main ideas from your reading. And I know there's lots. I mean, there's so much in this. So don't feel like you have to get every single point down, but as you, like, what resonated? What was your discussion mostly about? What's important for you that you feel you need to share with the other folks in the room that didn't read your section? So at your table groups, you each have chart paper, and you each have a marker, 2 markers. Let you color code a little bit. So I'm going to give us about 6 minutes to work together in your team to create, again, the goal is to share it with their colleagues so that they learn. Yeah. I think
Your identity.
I have a deficit view of my
What if I give you a second step, like when I
I have a math issue.
Somebody draw a label up there. No, just draw like a tag.
I like you're already lost me. I'm not feeling my music.
Can we do it right I could put a high and low. And then, so the other one is experience, right?
Yes, that they break down.
So,
What is
so on this side, we're going to put numbers. On the other side is, I'm trying to think of, like, here's my experience.
I think these are the coins that feel like it's money. I think that's a different way to like put it on. Okay, who wants to write? Maybe we title it. I don't care. They could do like a list. Help their kids their feelings instead of like
Money, the inventory, they were
Okay, so put experiences.
Number 4. Elevating professional learning. You don't have to write that. I will just do number 4.
Maybe we just say just mathematics, social justice. Yeah. I think
one thing I've learned from medicine.
or what I number 4. Yeah. Number 4.
Like, this is for educators. Yeah, for educators.
She was on the road with her family in an RV. The last I saw, they were like about because the last I saw, I have instruction on the labels where the
Right. Standardized test.
Yes, something like that.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Even like
Yeah, she was
Yeah. expected, I would say that most of you would have that really high. I mean, that high expectation, high.
Yeah, I don't know how. I was thinking, I really like the sentence about counter narratives. Like this socio-political aspect. Creates
So experiences, fundraising trips,
Oh, my expectation. And I was like, maybe you should have played. I put deficit orientation.
Oh, yeah.
How do we counter?
Like some kids just have it about 1 more minute. I just think, I don't know what you would say. It's not even majestic. I think it's just like this preset expectation. You come from
I always feel like
No, I just gave you the seal.
and that's an experience just
You're sharing great teaching for your component with everyone.
the way I see it. I always tell folks, I don't think that's
10 more seconds.
you're a hard teacher.
Explosive training. Explicit
All right, I'm going to ask for you to finish that last sentence that you're on.
Hold on, tracking affects mindset and income, education and income level.
And everyone take a seat. Okay. I don't want them up yet.
Future income levels, right?
Okay. On your, everyone could come back together. So individually, you kind of wrote your how you engaged or kind of related to the reading. If you turn that sheet over, there's a note-taking guide in the back. And so what I'm going to ask, if this is helpful to you, is as you're listening to the other presentations, you kind of jot down some of those key ideas on this note-taking guide. So we want you to have some kind of a resource to take back with you that has more information. You have the document yourself, but just like a kind of a cheat sheet for you about all 4 of them. So I'm going to ask each group to come on up, have 1 spokesperson or 2 if you want to have 2, to share kind of the key points or key elements of your reading. So who would like to start?
We will.
Number 1 will start. Perfect. So number 1 is eliminating deficit views. Okay.
So our component was eliminating deficit views on mathematical learning. And one of the things we talked about was about labels, right? So if we think about just labels in general, and I reflect all the way back to kinder, 1st grade. And thank you. And I shared one of my personal stories. So I was a migrant kid here in California, born and raised here. Spanish was my first language. And I can't remember the exact grade, but it was like 2nd or 3rd grade. And I had to be the translator for parent-teacher conference, right? So teacher would say something and then, explain it to my parents. And then came the part about math, like, oh, you need to tell your parents you're not doing well in math. So I stared her straight in the eye, and I remember, I didn't tell this part, but I remember I told my parents, dice la maestra que no voy muy bien en las matemáticas de 4 grado, pero estoy muy bien en los de 3 grado. And what I basically said was, just because she knew somewhat of Spanish, but she heard me saying, though, that I'm not doing well. Yeah, I wasn't doing well for 4th grade math, but I'm in 3rd grade.
Oh.
So I'm doing okay in 3rd grade. So, but the thing is, what she didn't understand, and I told my group, is at home, I had a Tupperware empire, right? Because my mom would sell Tupperware, and I was her translator. I was the guy that went out and sold, and I did the transaction of the money. Same thing with my father. With my father, he would sell, sodas and lunch, to his workers. So on the weekends, I would do that. Or sometimes, he would fix other people's cars. So I was always people's translator, exchanging of money and how much stuff was, rounding off. So there was a lot, but that was never shared in the classroom, right? In the classroom, I was always confused about trying to figure out why someone's getting on a train going 30 miles per hour southwest. And I'm like, why are you going on a train? Take the bus. It's a lot cheaper, right? So anyway, we talk about labels because we do it all the time, and when we think about our system, right? We're set up that way. Think about grades. That was another thing that we talked about when I first started teaching. My mind was blown because I would ask other teachers like, "Hey, how are you grading this? How?" And I still remember this one teacher's like, "Well, just take a pen and just start marking stuff, and whatever flows." And I'm like, "What?" Right? And I had other teachers who created their own rubrics, and I just remember, I'm like, "Oh, good Lord!" Right? This is the Wild Wild West. Right? So an A in your class does not mean the same thing as an A in your class. And I think this is institutionalized when we think about it in that sense. The other part we talked about is thinking off the bat that certain kids don't have the experiences. And that, of course, is a big false, because all students come with some type of experience. It's just, trying to figure out what those are. So on this side, right, I might not know how to, similar to what you said earlier, I might not know how to do the math this particular way, but my older sister went to school in Mexicali and she showed me this way, but you're telling me I'm doing it wrong. So it's not that you as a teacher not only know how to do it one way, but you're also not accepting other ways of doing it. So it's something I think just in teaching in general is, how do we teach, or how do we unlearn the way we learn and be open to different ideas? Did I sum it up?
So you got to post that up for us?
I'm sorry?
Could you just put it on the wall? Yeah. So the whole idea around labeling, and we do that to kids in kindergarten. We'll say, oh, Amy is slow in math. And then what happens, 1st grade? Oh, well, and the kindergarten teacher says, oh, yeah, she struggled in math. What happens in 2nd grade? Oh, she struggled in math. So in kindergarten, there's this perception that she's struggling in math, and it just carries her all the way through. So we have to be really careful. Or like a student with disabilities, or students that's dyslexic. That doesn't mean they can't do math. Doesn't mean they can't understand. That doesn't mean they have high intelligence. It's that they are a student with dyslexic. Or dyslexia, sorry. So being careful that when we're labeling students, we're putting some kind of barriers on them sometimes, like how far they can go. So we have to be really careful. And as teachers, it's so easy to do that. Or gifted kids, oh, he or she is gifted, so they need to be over here. Well, are they really strong in math? Really, what are they gifted in? Gifted is so broad. So, just kind of be careful and cautious, because those things happen in kindergarten, and they keep on going and going and going. Okay, the second one, which is eradicating mathematics as a gatekeeper.
I can be your Vanna White and hold the poster.
There you go. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to put a little bit of time bound on this now, because we only have 15 minutes left.
So it was math as a gatekeeper. And basically it starts with standardized testing, which leads to tracking. And then the tracking leads to them being pigeonholed is what we were saying into different classes. It's social segregation, leaders in working class roles. And algebra seems to be the one area in math that is the gatekeeper that really tracks kids to where they're going to go and will determine their future. Tracking effects of their mindset, their education, their future income levels, and affects marginalized groups, so non-white, racial, ethnic, cultural groups.
And the socioeconomic background, and the socioeconomic background of those same groups as well.
And when we look at tracking in some instances is happening as early as 2nd grade. If we're doing centers in our classroom, and our centers are ability grouped, then we're tracking.
My students are tracked.
Unless it's okay to do that sometimes, but if every single day these 3 are together and they're getting the challenging problems, and every single day these 3 are with me and I'm doing the remedial work, I'm tracking in my classroom. So we have to be careful when we think about differentiating in our classroom. We sometimes want to pull that small group for sure. We definitely want to be challenging those kids for sure. But if we are not having flexible grouping, then that's starting. If we're in grade 3, 4, and 5, if we have the high kids with this teacher, the on-level kids here, and the low kids over here, we're tracking in grade 3. And those kids that are in the high group in 5th grade, my bet is those kids are going to end up in the high level in grade 6 and when that starts. And those kids that are in the middle and low, they're not going to have a shot because they didn't get pushed. So we have to be careful of that. The research shows, over and over again, that there's no benefit for low kids, on-level kids, or your higher mathematical students by tracking in elementary grades. There's none. Even in middle school, there's not research to support it. So we have to be like, why are we doing that? Question. Okay, thank you. Okay, 3, socio-political turn.
I don't know if I can explain very well. Is this okay?
You can.
So socio-political turn, we really focused on these key ideas. One was focused on just how institutional, historical, and cultural factors shape the student's math identity. And the identity itself is dynamic, negotiated, and complex. So it's changing over time, right? Also, that learning of math needs to be dynamic and fluid to meet the needs of the students. So it's shifting as students are moving through different concepts. I shouldn't elaborate, I should just stick to it. That skills can be applied to socio-political situations and relationships. So it's not just the factors they're bringing in, but also the outgoing application, providing counter narratives to deficit orientations. We were like sitting with that for a minute. Thinking about like how either individuals or traditionally marginalized groups, we kind of categorize in terms of these deficit perspectives. And then the piece kind of talked about how we can create counter narratives about those students related to math instruction. And then finally, that math can be used to solve real world problems and situations, and that new math can be learned to address those issues. And then there was the last sentence just about facilitating math proficiencies that transcend textbooks is a social justice act.
Great. So the whole identity piece, how do you see yourself as a mathematician, and how do others view you? Those two things to be thinking about. In your class, you might be thinking about that some child thinks, I am the student that's good at math. Like I am, and everyone kind of looks at that student as a strong student in math. And so even when that student makes a mistake, no one wants to acknowledge that because I'm not going to push against him or her, right? So that whole identity piece is super important.
You summarized that so well.
Thank you. I don't know why this comes up. Okay, and the last one, which is elevating professional learning of mathematics teachers and leaders with a dual focus on mathematics and social justice. No.
All right. So the three points that we wrote down were that understanding of math content for an educator is insufficient. What really needs to happen to get a positive effect is on top of equitable practices, we need high expectations of students, high quality content, that's part of it, and then strong community connections, strong family and community connections. And we also need explicit training in how to connect math to social aspects. Like, it's not enough to be told at these trainings to do that, but also teach us how to do it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so that is very briefly the 4 different components of social justice. And in the position paper, it talks about how to implement. Thank you for asking about that. How do we do this, right? Like, all this theory is great. So we call these the 3 A's. Oops, God, I don't know what to do with that. The first is acknowledgement. We have to acknowledge that our current system is unjust for all students. We have to acknowledge that. That's the first step in any kind of issue we're tackling. And it's grounded in legacy of discrimination based on race, gender, class, and ethnicity. That's the way it's been. Second, it's important for us to take action to create and sustain instructional policy. God, I don't know what to say with that. Sorry. So we have equitable teaching practices for all students. So if we're seeing something happening, we can, it's too bad, and it's affecting some student, we need to have a voice. And sometimes that's not going to make us very popular. But one of the things you need to be thinking about is what's best for kids. I oftentimes put my own kids in that situation. Like, if that was my kid and this was happening to them, what would I do? That often helps me. And the third one is accountability, like holding each other accountable. Like, if I'm just going to say some comment about the student that's walking on the street, and Bernadette might say, Kirsten, that's not okay. Like, we got to hold each other accountable for that, to like kind of keep each other kind of in check as we're going through. So those are the 3 different actions. On page number 4 and 5, there's different like steps that they talk around about belief systems, curriculum and instruction, and partnering with families. That was brought up. This training we did in an hour and a half with you guys. We oftentimes spend like, this is a whole day. Like, we're trying to get so much in, and we totally ran out of time with what we wanted to do, to be honest with you. And this is just like baby steps I've got kind of with the conversation. So Jenny and Bernadette, what do we want to do next?
Yes, Jenny.
Do we want to just share? We can put the tasks in the back and just share.
So we recognize
that part.
There's about 7 minutes left. Maybe we could use this time depending on, some of you may want to go under. Some of you might have some lingering questions, and we're happy to do a Q&A. We actually have each planned a kind of grade span breakout with through the lens of mathematics. So we're happy to share that. And so maybe, depending on the needs of the group, and we're happy to kind of split as needed, some of us can, in the remaining 7 minutes, either do a task with you, or some of us can stay and do Q&A with one of us, and some of us can, dig deeper into the article with another one of us. So we'd like to kind of open it up and let us know what would be most helpful.
But we would love for you to go back to that index card, at the back of that index card, where we initially put our initial understanding of social justice to them now after these less than 1.5 hours of experience with us, to kind of like, if your thinking of social justice has changed, that you could also reflect that in this card. But I guess we started also with, showing you those 8 dimensions, and we said that we highlight, or we will be able to, we'll try to highlight 3 of those 8 dimensions: participation, positioning, broadening mathematics, and ownership. And in the engagement, or in the activities that we ask you to engage with, I'd like to just highlight that we did
have participation and positioning as a way to highlight that. I like one of the authors or one of our speakers talk about, identity. How he or she, I forget this. This? Was it Catherine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Let's enhance and let's support our students to author their journey towards learning, gaining those skills and knowledge of mathematics, and help them be author of their learning as we facilitate that. So we gave you the opportunity of that think time, the use of tools like Post-it notes to write your thoughts and show evidence of you responding to some of the tasks. And that's actually positioning or participation, because we also acknowledge you being the author of the learning. Broadening mathematics or broadening the concept area, when we use those quotes, we ask you to either, you draw, doodle, or write, and that's also showing some forms or different forms of showing your knowledge or opinions under the quotes that we ask you to do. And that's the same thing with math. There's so many, yes. Oh, no. You, now on. So, in other words, we encourage our teachers, we support our teachers to truly value the different entry points of our students to approach mathematics. And if it's by way of drawing, by way of equations, by way of graphs, by way of written forms, those are great ways to show their approaches of mathematics, their understanding of mathematics. And we did that with you as well. Ownership. We shifted the content, the context to your own. And so we invite you to, if it's not about math, as a parent, your perspective or your lens as a district administrator, as special ed, different grade levels that you have, and to also bring in those personal experiences. So those are, kind of like we modeled those equity-based practices as well, to have you experience the different opportunities that we can bring in, especially for mathematics, because that's still is a tough task for a lot of teachers to shift the ownership, shift the authority to students, gaining all those information and learning from them. It's 2 minutes before 12:15.
So, yeah. We'd like to invite you to go to lunch.
And thank you so much.
Thank you so much.